Savage, starving dog stumbles upon a crying baby. What it does next will break your heart. The cold air cut through the forest like a blade, its icy grip biting deep into the bones. A haunting silence hung over Clearwater Forest, broken only by the eerie sound of wind whispering through the skeletal trees. It was a night like any other in the wilderness, but for one dog. It would mark the beginning of an impossible mission. Hunter, once a proud canine officer, had been alone for weeks, his once muscular frame now gaunt and frail from hunger. His ribs ached beneath his matted fur, and the scars on his face told stories of fierce survival. The dark forest had become his home since the tragic night Officer James Miller had fallen. His last words echoing in Hunter's mind. "Protect the innocent, Hunter. That's what we do." Hunter's amber eyes glowed with a haunting sorrow as he limped through the snow-covered underbrush. The days of chasing criminals and saving children seemed like a distant memory. Now, the only thing that mattered was finding food, surviving. But on that night, something deeper pulled him forward, through the biting cold and into the heart of the unknown. A faint sound reached his ears, a cry. Soft at first, almost lost in the wind. Then it came again, a baby's cry, weak and desperate. Hunter's heart raced as he froze, instinctively lowering his body and becoming alert. He was starving, exhausted. His body screamed for rest. But this cry, it wasn't like the distant calls of wildlife or the sounds of the wind. It was human, vulnerable. It reminded him of his former life, of his handler's voice, of children he had sworn to protect. With each aching step, he pushed forward, driven by something stronger than hunger or pain, his training. The bond he had with his handler, James Miller, was more than a partnership. It was a promise, one that Hunter had sworn to uphold, even in the darkest of moments. And then, through the trees, he saw it. A small bundle, barely visible beneath a layer of snow and dirt. The cries weakened as Hunter approached, the baby's tiny hands flailing in the cold air. The fragile little thing, no more than a few months old, lay abandoned at the base of a massive oak tree. Hunter's nose twitched as he approached, carefully lowering his body to protect the baby from the cold. His years of training told him how to handle such a delicate situation. He needed to remain gentle but precise. His large paw rested gently on the edge of the blanket as he nudged it, ensuring the baby was still alive. The faintest heartbeat, the coldness of her skin, it confirmed his worst fears. She was in danger. As he assessed the situation, his ears perked up. Something was wrong. The usual sounds of the forest had vanished. The wind had stopped. There was a heavy stillness, and in the distance, a pack of wolves howled, their hungry calls drawing closer. Hunter's fur bristled, his body tensing as the wolves' scent filled the air. They were close, but Hunter had made a choice. He would not fail again. Not this time. He had failed his handler, James Miller, but he would not fail this child. He would protect her with every ounce of his strength. The pack approached, their eyes gleaming with hunger. The first wolf lunged, but Hunter was faster. His snarls echoed through the trees, warning the pack to stay away. His massive body, though weak from months of survival, still commanded authority. He met the wolf's attack with precision, driving it back. But the pack was relentless, circling, looking for weakness. Hunter fought back, each move calculated, a perfect display of canine training. He had no choice but to defend. The baby needed him. His injuries slowed him, but his resolve never faltered. The wolves kept pressing, but Hunter never gave an inch. He protected the child fiercely, each strike and defensive posture a testament to his years of service. And as the wolves retreated for a moment, Hunter knew they couldn't stay exposed for long. The baby was hypothermic, her cries growing weaker by the minute. Hunter could hear the wolves regrouping, preparing for another attack. He had to act quickly. Hunter spotted an old, abandoned cabin in the distance, barely visible through the trees. It was their only hope. Despite the pain in his injured leg, he gripped the edge of the baby's blanket in his teeth and began the careful trek toward shelter. Each step was agonizing, but his determination drove him forward. The wolves were still behind him, but this time they waited. They knew Hunter's resolve. They knew the fight would not be easy. And so they followed, waiting for their moment. Hunter's mind was focused only on one thing: getting the baby to safety. The cabin was still far away, but it was their only chance. He had failed before, but this time he would succeed. He would be the protector he was trained to be. For her, for the innocent. Welcome to Heart Force, where you and I find more meaning in life through stories about dogs. Before we continue, please comment below and let us know where you are listening to this video from. And if you have any stories about your dog, feel free to share them with everyone. Hunter's every muscle screamed in protest as he carried the baby, step by step, through the dense forest. The weight of her fragile body in his teeth, the cold seeping into his bones, and the blood oozing from his injuries all threatened to overwhelm him. But there was no time for weakness. There was no room for doubt. He had made a promise, and he would keep it, whatever the cost. The wolves had not given up. Their howls echoed in the distance, drawing closer. The sound almost as cold as the snow that crunched beneath his paws. The night had deepened, the darkness now absolute, and Hunter's senses sharpened. His police training kicked in again. Move carefully, stay aware, protect at all costs. With each painful step, Hunter's thoughts drifted back to his handler, Officer James Miller. Miller had been more than a partner to Hunter. He had been family, a bond forged in blood and trust. They had been inseparable. Through every rescue, every child saved, Hunter had been by Miller's side, always ready, always focused. Protect the innocent, Miller had said before the end. That command had burned into Hunter's very being, and it guided him now, as the forest seemed to close in around him. The cabin was closer now, but with each yard, it felt further away. The journey had become a test of endurance, not just for Hunter, but for the tiny baby he was protecting. Her cries had softened, then ceased altogether, sending a chill of worry through him. The silence was worse than any sound. Hunter's instinct screamed for him to hurry, but the need to protect the child kept him moving forward. The winter air was biting, and the snow beneath his paws was treacherous, but he couldn't stop. The distant howls of the wolves grew louder. They were closer now, their hunger driving them to chase their prey. But Hunter refused to falter. The cabin was just ahead, its silhouette barely visible against the night sky. It was old, its roof sagging, its walls weathered by time, but it would provide shelter that Hunter and the baby desperately needed. As he neared the cabin, he could feel the wolves closing in behind him. Their scent, sharp and hungry, filled the air. One wrong move, one misstep, they would be upon him. Hunter's teeth gripped the blanket tighter, his body low to the ground as he made his way inside the crumbling building. The door hung loosely on its hinges, the wood creaking as he nudged it open with his snout. Inside, the air was cold but still. The cabin had long been abandoned, but it offered a refuge, at least for now. Hunter carefully laid the baby down in the corner. And for the first time since he had found her, Hunter allowed himself to breathe a little easier. But the wolves were not far behind. Hunter could feel their presence, their eyes watching from the shadows. They knew the game had changed, and they would wait for their moment to strike. He couldn't stay here long. Hunter moved to the door, his senses alert. The wolves were circling outside. Their hunger was palpable. The crunch of their paws in the snow echoed through the cabin, growing louder with every passing moment. Hunter stood in the doorway, his large body a shield between the baby and the threat outside. Stay calm, he told himself. Stay focused. His body was failing him, but his training was still sharp. He would fight. He would protect. The first wolf lunged at him from the darkness. Hunter met the attack with a snarl, his teeth flashing in the dim light as he fought back. The wolf was large, its eyes gleaming with hunger. But Hunter was stronger. His powerful jaws clamped down on the animal's neck, forcing it to retreat. The wolf snarled, but did not give up, circling, looking for another opening. Hunter's muscles ached, and his leg, still weak from the injuries he had suffered months ago, threatened to buckle beneath him, but he refused to let it show. He stood tall, his body ready for the next attack. Another wolf darted in, its teeth flashing as it tried to close the distance between itself and the baby. But Hunter was faster. He knocked the second wolf away with a powerful swipe of his paw, his focus unshaken. He had no intention of letting them near the child, not while he still had breath in his body. The battle raged on. The wolves were relentless, but Hunter fought with every ounce of strength he had left. Each strike, each defensive move, was driven by one singular goal: protect the child. As the battle continued, Hunter's thoughts once again turned to his handler, James Miller. It had been Miller who had taught him to never give up, to fight even when all seemed lost. It was Miller's voice that echoed in his mind now. Protect the innocent, Hunter. That's what we do. And Hunter would. He would protect her until his very last breath. The wolves backed off again, retreating into the shadows, sensing that they were facing an opponent unlike any other. Hunter stood tall in the doorway, his body shaking with exhaustion, but his resolve unwavering. He had survived worse, and tonight he would survive again. For her, for the innocent child who needed him. As the wind howled through the trees and the cold continued to creep into his bones, Hunter knew that the battle was far from over. But for the first time in months, he felt something stir deep within him. It wasn't hunger. It wasn't fear. It was purpose. Hunter was not just surviving. He was fighting for something greater than himself. He was fighting for the innocent, and he would not stop until she was safe. The hours dragged on like an endless night, and the cabin's cold grip tightened around them. Hunter's injured body, though exhausted, remained alert. His eyes flicked to the doorway, his every sense attuned to the sounds outside. The wolves had not left. They prowled the forest, waiting for any sign of weakness. Hunter could hear them, their low growls and snarls drifting through the night. The battle had taken everything from him: his strength, his energy, his ability to focus. His leg throbbed with pain, the old injury worsening with each movement. Yet there was no choice but to fight. There was no room for weakness, not with the baby's life hanging in the balance. He turned to look at her. The baby, still wrapped in the blanket he had carefully placed around her, lay silent. Her small chest rose and fell, each breath a fragile whisper. The absence of her cries troubled him. It had been hours since he'd first found her, and though he had shielded her with his body, Hunter knew she was slipping. The cold had settled deep into her bones, and the snowstorm outside had only worsened. She needed warmth, food, and care, things Hunter couldn't provide. The storm outside howled, but it was the wolves' movements that brought Hunter back to reality. Their sounds were getting closer again. He had to move. The wolf pack was persistent. They had tasted blood in the cold of the night, and now they could smell the child's vulnerability. Hunter's instincts, sharpened through years of service, told him it wasn't safe here anymore. He needed to get the baby to a place of warmth and safety, away from the wilderness that had already claimed so much from him. With great care, Hunter gripped the edge of the blanket with his teeth, gently lifting the child. The pain in his body flared with every step, but he pressed on. The cabin was no longer a safe haven. The wolves would come soon enough, and Hunter knew there was only one option: get to higher ground, a place where he could defend them both. Through the darkened forest, he began his slow retreat. Every step was a battle, his limbs aching, his stomach growling in hunger, and his spirit hanging by a thread. But the child, she needed him, and that thought was enough to push him forward. The wolves had caught their scent. The first one appeared in the distance, eyes glinting in the dark. Hunter's hackles rose, his growl low and menacing. He stood between the child and the approaching predator, ready to fight. The wolf hesitated, sensing that this was no ordinary dog. This was Hunter, one of the most trained, the most dedicated canine officers to ever wear a badge. With a snarl, the wolf lunged. But Hunter was quicker. He met the wolf head-on, knocking it back with a powerful swipe of his paw. The force sent the wolf tumbling into the snow, but it quickly recovered, joining its packmates in a circle around him. Hunter's heart raced as more wolves appeared from the shadows, their eyes glowing like embers in the night. They were hungry, driven by desperation, but Hunter was resolute. He was a protector, trained to fight for the innocent, and tonight he would not fail. The wolves circled, probing for weaknesses. But Hunter stood his ground, his focus unwavering. His amber eyes, once full of joy and purpose, now burned with determination. This was more than just survival. This was a mission, a promise made to Officer James Miller that Hunter would protect the innocent, no matter the cost. As the wolves approached, Hunter moved with deadly precision, using his strength and training to keep them at bay. The snow swirled around him as he fought. Each strike, each lunge, each bark a testament to the warrior within. He had fought for children before, saved lives, and stood tall in the face of danger. And tonight, he would do it again. Despite his weakening condition, Hunter remained a force to be reckoned with. He fought back the pack, one wolf at a time, never once breaking his defensive stance. His body was covered in new wounds, but he didn't falter. The baby, Sarah, was the only thing that mattered now. The wolves were relentless, but Hunter's will was stronger. Slowly, they began to retreat, sensing that this was no ordinary battle. Hunter's presence, his strength, and the wolves would return. He needed to move, and quickly. His muscles screamed for rest, his body protesting with every step, but there was no time to waste. Hunter's instincts led him toward a clearing in the distance, a place that offered higher ground, a safer position to protect the baby. He moved carefully, his leg threatening to give way. But he pressed on. The snow crunched beneath him, the cold creeping into his bones with every step. He could hear the wolves again, their howls growing louder in the distance, but he refused to stop. At last, they reached the clearing. It wasn't much, a small rise in the land with a few trees scattered about, offering some shelter from the wind. But it was all Hunter had. He set the baby down in the snow for a moment, quickly scanning the surroundings. There were no immediate threats, but he could hear the wolves, still waiting, still prowling in the shadows. Hunter curled his body around Sarah, using his warmth to protect her. His muscles burned, and the pain in his leg was almost unbearable, but he had made it this far, and he would make it further. For her. As the storm raged on, Hunter stood vigilant. His amber eyes scanned the trees, watching for any sign of movement. His breathing was shallow, each inhale an effort as his body screamed for rest. But his eyes never left the forest. The baby's faint cries were the only sound in the stillness, a reminder of why he was still here, still fighting. She needed him, and he would fight for her for as long as it took. Dawn's pale light barely pierced the thick clouds above, casting a dim, gray glow over the snow-covered forest. Hunter's body was stiff with cold and fatigue, but his duty never wavered. As he lay curled protectively around Sarah, his thoughts remained focused on one thing: survival. His leg ached with every breath, and the blood-soaked fur from his previous battle with the wolves stuck to his side. But his focus was sharp. He wasn't just protecting himself anymore. He was protecting the child, the innocent. The same drive that had kept him loyal to Officer James Miller in the past now kept him standing tall against the cold winds and harsh wilderness. The forest was silent, almost too quiet. The howls of the wolves had ceased, but Hunter knew it was only temporary. They would return soon. They always did. His amber eyes scanned the horizon, his ears flicking at every sound. His muscles tensed, ready for anything, but his mind remained clear. Stay alert. Protect. Survive. He looked down at the baby again. Sarah's tiny chest rose and fell, but her skin had a bluish tinge to it, the cruel cold stealing her warmth with every passing moment. Hunter gently nudged her with his nose, trying to provide warmth with his own body heat. She needed more than what he could give her. She needed shelter, food, and care. But most of all, she needed time that was slipping away with every hour they spent out here. The urgency was palpable now. The decision had been made. Hunter could stay and fight, hoping for a miracle, or he could take the risk and move forward, further into the unknown in search of safety. His years of police training and search and rescue operations guided him toward the latter. He knew the risks, but staying here would only delay the inevitable. He had to move. Hunter carefully gripped Sarah's blanket in his teeth once more, using his powerful jaws to lift her from the ground. The pain in his leg flared, sharp and intense, but he gritted his teeth and pressed on. Every step he took, every movement he made, was calculated, each one driven by an unyielding will to protect the innocent child in his care. The wolves were still out there. Hunter could sense them. Their presence lingered in the air, thick and heavy. But he couldn't stop. There was no turning back. He limped forward, his body protesting, but his mind laser-focused on the path ahead. It wasn't long before the wolves began to follow. They had seen him move, and they would not give up so easily. He could hear their low growls in the distance, their hunger growing with every step. Hunter didn't turn around. He didn't need to. He could hear their movements, feel their eyes on him. But he kept his pace steady, determined to reach safety. The forest seemed to close in around them as they moved deeper into the woods. The trees were taller here, their thick trunks towering overhead, their branches bare and stretching like skeletal hands toward the sky. The wind had picked up, carrying with it the scent of predators and danger. Hunter's instincts screamed at him to move faster, but he knew better than to rush. His training had taught him patience. Every move had to be calculated, deliberate. And then, as if to mock him, the sky opened up. Snow began to fall heavily, blanketing the ground and obscuring his vision. The cold bit deeper, the wind howling like a living creature. Every step became more difficult, more treacherous, but Hunter pressed on, his resolve unshaken. The wolves were closer now. He could feel them closing in, their movements erratic as they tried to find an opening. Hunter's grip on Sarah's blanket tightened, his body lowering instinctively into a defensive position. His legs ached with exhaustion, and his hunger gnawed at his insides. But he had come too far to fail now. The first wolf appeared from the shadows, its eyes gleaming with hunger. Hunter's growl was a low rumble, a warning to the predator that this ground would not be surrendered. The wolf hesitated for a moment, its body tensed, but lunged toward Hunter with vicious speed. With a growl of his own, Hunter met the attack head-on, his jaws snapping, his massive frame slamming into the wolf. The two beasts collided in a blur of fur and teeth. Hunter's injuries slowed him, but his training kept him steady. He fought with the precision of a seasoned warrior, pushing the wolf back with every strike, driving it into the snow. The wolf yelped in pain, retreating into the shadows as others joined the fray. Hunter could feel the pack closing in on him. They were calculating their moves, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. But Hunter had no intention of letting them win. He was the protector. He was the shield between innocence and danger. He would not allow them to harm Sarah. As the wolves circled, Hunter positioned himself between them and the baby, using his body as a barrier. Each movement was slow, deliberate, but the wolves had learned to respect him. They kept their distance, circling, watching, waiting for their chance. But Hunter was a seasoned fighter, and he knew their tactics. He wasn't about to let them outsmart him. He could feel Sarah's tiny body tremble against his. Her breath shallow, her cries soft and few. She was weakening. Hunter's heart raced. He had to get her to safety. He had to keep moving. The wolves were relentless, but Hunter was resolute. He stood tall, every muscle aching, every breath a struggle, but he never wavered. The fight wasn't over yet. The night was far from finished, and Hunter would not stop until she was safe. The storm raged on, its fury intensifying with each passing minute. Snowflakes whipped through the air, biting at Hunter's fur and making every step feel like an impossible task. But still, he moved forward. He had no choice. The baby, Sarah, was growing weaker in his grip, and every step he took was a battle against exhaustion, against the cold, against the wolves that continued to stalk them. The world around them had become a frozen wasteland. The trees, once familiar, now appeared like looming shadows. their skeletal branches reaching down to grab at them as they passed. The snow beneath Hunter's paws grew deeper with each step, making the journey harder, but his resolve was unwavering. His body was battered, broken, but his spirit, forged in the fires of training and loyalty, would not yield. The wolves were closer now. Hunter could hear their low growls, the crunch of their paws in the snow. They were waiting for him to make a mistake. But Hunter had been through this before. His training, his instincts, all told him the same thing. Keep moving. Never stop. Protect the innocent. He glanced down at Sarah, still nestled in his protective grip. Her tiny body trembled, her breaths shallow and uneven. Her cries had stopped hours ago, and the weight of her fragile form in his mouth only served to remind him of how desperately she needed help. She couldn't survive much longer out here in the cold. The wolves' presence was more than just a physical threat now. It was a reminder of how much time was slipping away. Hunter's mind raced, and though his body begged for rest, he knew the decision had to be made. It was time to take the risk. Up ahead, he spotted a small clearing, a break in the trees that led toward what appeared to be a road, far beyond the wilderness he had known for so long. It was their best chance. If he could just make it there, just get through the final stretch, rescue would be close. With renewed determination, Hunter pushed on, his legs protesting with every painful step. The wolves, sensing his movement, began to close in. Their growls grew louder, their eyes flashing in the dim light as they circled, ready to strike. But Hunter kept his pace steady. His focus was absolute. He was no longer just surviving. He was fighting for Sarah, fighting for a chance to bring her to safety. The first wolf lunged again, its eyes full of hunger, its body a blur of motion. Hunter met it head-on, his powerful jaws locking onto the predator's throat in a ferocious grip. The wolf yelped, its strength weakening under Hunter's pressure, but the others came. They attacked from all angles, circling him, trying to find an opening. Hunter fought back with everything he had left. His years of police training, the hours spent perfecting defensive techniques, kicked in. He was faster, stronger than the wolves expected. With each strike, each defensive lunge, he pushed them back. But they were relentless. There were too many of them. Then, just as Hunter felt the weight of the battle bearing down on him, a new sound reached his ears. The unmistakable hum of an engine, far off, but growing closer. The sound of help. His heart leaped with hope. They weren't alone. With one final push, Hunter forced the last wolf into retreat, its body stumbling backward before it disappeared into the forest. But the pack would not stay away for long. Time was running out. Hunter turned his gaze back to Sarah. She was still alive, but just barely. Her tiny body was shivering violently, and Hunter could feel her growing weaker in his mouth. He needed to make it to that road, to that distant hope of rescue. But the journey was still perilous. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Hunter spotted movement in the distance. The flash of lights. Vehicles. People. Rescue. It was real. Help was here. With every ounce of strength he had left, Hunter began to move toward the road. He stumbled over the snow, his legs threatening to buckle beneath him, but he kept going. The sound of the engines grew louder, and as he broke through the trees, he saw them. Rangers, vehicles, people rushing toward him. But they weren't the only ones watching. The wolves had not given up. One last, desperate wolf emerged from the trees, its eyes fixed on Sarah, its hunger overwhelming any caution. It lunged. Hunter's body moved without thought. His instincts took over. With a snarl, he threw himself at the wolf, using all his remaining strength to tackle it to the ground. His body crashed into the snow with a thud, but he was determined. He couldn't let the wolf get close. Not now. Not after everything he had fought for. With a powerful bite, Hunter ended the threat, his last breath coming in a sharp snarl. The wolf, defeated, slunk back into the forest. Hunter remained on the ground, his body aching, his wounds fresh and deep, but he had done it. The Rangers arrived moments later, rushing toward him. They recognized him instantly, their eyes widening with disbelief as they saw Hunter, the K-9 officer thought lost forever, standing between them and the last of the wolves. A woman, a ranger, knelt beside him, her voice soft but firm. "It's okay now, boy. You're safe. She's safe." The warmth of the rescue team's presence surrounded Hunter, but he didn't move. He could barely stand. His body was giving out. But the child, Sarah, was now in the hands of those who could help her. As they took Sarah in their arms, Hunter let out a quiet whine, his eyes never leaving her. She was safe. And then, for the first time in what felt like forever, Hunter allowed himself to rest. The weight of the mission lifted, and he finally closed his eyes, knowing that he had done his duty. He had protected her. He had fought until the end. This story of Hunter's loyalty and courage is a powerful reminder of the strength within all of us when faced with the impossible. It shows us that even in the darkest moments, we can find the courage to rise, to protect, and to survive. Hunter's journey embodies resilience and sacrifice, showing that true strength comes from the heart, an unwavering commitment to others, no matter the cost. It reminds us that sometimes the most heroic acts come from those who ask for nothing in return, but give everything they have. Please share your thoughts on the story in the comments. How has this story touched you? What does Hunter's journey mean to you? Don't forget to subscribe to the Heart Force channel for more inspirational stories of courage and resilience. The wind howled through the streets of Millbrook, Connecticut, as the last of the autumn leaves scattered across the cobblestone market square. The morning was crisp, and Emily Parker skipped along beside her parents, eager for their weekly Saturday tradition. As always, the market was bustling with life, the scent of fresh produce and spices filling the air, vendors calling out greetings, and familiar faces exchanging smiles. But this Saturday, something was different. A rustle in the shadows between the stalls caught Emily's sharp eye. She froze. A German shepherd, once proud and noble, sat alone, his fur matted, ribs showing through the thin layer of skin. His amber eyes, once filled with purpose and strength, now reflected a deep sadness. Tied to a metal post by a frayed rope, he was clearly forgotten, abandoned by the world that once relied on him. Emily's heart skipped a beat. This dog needed help. "Mom, Dad, look," she whispered urgently, tugging at her parents' sleeves. Her voice was steady, but her eyes spoke volumes of empathy far beyond her years. Welcome to Heart Force Channel, where you and I find more meaning in life through stories about dogs. Before we continue, please comment below and let us know where you are listening to this video from. And if you have any stories about your dog, feel free to share them with everyone. David Parker, a civil rights attorney, instinctively reached for Emily's hand, concern growing in his chest as he saw the dog. He had heard the stories, the ones that had made the rounds in town about the dangerous police dog, who had once been a hero but had now become a symbol of fear and mistrust. Emily, however, wasn't afraid. Her soft blue eyes met the dog's gaze, and in that moment, she saw beyond the scars, beyond the past that had unjustly marred his reputation. She saw a hero. "Please, I think he's just sad," Emily said quietly, her small hand pointing toward the dog. "He needs us." David hesitated. He recognized the dog, a local K-9 hero named Thor. He had once been part of the Millbrook Police Department's K-9 unit, saving lives in floods, fires, and rescue missions. But a tragic misunderstanding during a fire had turned the community against him. It wasn't just the dog's story that had been twisted, it was also Michael Bradford, the officer who had once worked alongside Thor, who had been forced to give up his best friend. Thor had gone from being a guardian angel to an outcast. But Emily wasn't deterred by the whispers of fear. She crouched down, slowly moving closer to Thor with a grace that spoke of her natural ability to connect with animals. She remembered everything her parents had taught her about empathy and kindness. Slowly, she lowered herself to the ground, making herself small to avoid scaring him. "Hi, Thor," she whispered softly. her voice a gentle melody over the noise of the bustling market. Thor lifted his head, his gaze locking onto hers. For a brief moment, there was something in his eyes, a flicker of hope, a spark of recognition. He was still the dog who had once rescued countless lives, the dog who had protected his handler and others with unwavering loyalty. But now, in the cold reality of his abandonment, it was clear that he had lost his way. Yet, something about Emily, something about the purity of her heart, called to him. "He's not dangerous, Mom," Emily said, her voice filled with certainty, not a trace of fear. "He's just been hurt. He needs someone to show him love again." David stood frozen for a moment, torn between the fear that gripped him, the fear of taking a risk, of taking in a dog with a history so clouded, and the love that filled his daughter's words. He glanced over at Sarah, who had been observing the scene quietly. He could see the familiar look in her eyes, compassion, understanding, and, most importantly, a deep trust in Emily's instincts. "You're right, sweetheart," Sarah said softly, "but we need to be careful. This dog has been through a lot." Emily looked up at her parents, her eyes pleading. "Please, I promise, he's a good dog. I can see it in his eyes." Sarah turned to the vendor, Mr. Chin, who had been watching the exchange. He stepped forward and nodded slowly, his voice quiet but firm. "She's right," he said. "I've seen him for weeks now. He's been treated badly, but he's never hurt anyone. He just needs a second chance." Emily gently reached in her pocket and pulled out an apple, her breakfast that she had saved for later. "Are you hungry, Thor?" she asked softly, her heart aching as she watched the dog's weary gaze follow her every movement. Without waiting for a response, she broke the apple into pieces and slowly extended her hand, offering it to him. Thor hesitated for a moment, and then, with a careful grace that reminded Emily of his former heroism, he reached out and took the apple from her hand with a gentleness that spoke of a spirit still intact despite the trials he had faced. "See," Emily whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "You're not alone anymore." The crowd that had gathered around them was silent now, all eyes on the small girl and the broken dog that had once been a symbol of strength. Emily had already begun to weave a new story for Thor, one filled with compassion, healing, and the power of second chances. And Thor, for the first time in months, began to believe in it. The days that followed were filled with an unsettling quiet. The air had grown colder, and the vibrant energy of Millbrook streets seemed to drain out of Thor with each passing day. Despite the community's attempts to offer him solace, whispers of his past followed him like a shadow. Thor, once a beloved hero, now sat bound by the same rope that symbolized his fall from grace. No longer the canine officer who had saved lives, he was now the dog that had attacked during the school fire. As the weeks passed, Emily continued to visit Thor, bringing him apples, petting him, and speaking to him softly. At home, her thoughts were consumed by the dog. She couldn't shake the image of his sorrowful eyes, nor could she ignore the deep sense of injustice she felt for him. Emily had an innate understanding that Thor's pain wasn't just physical. It was a soul-deep wound, a trauma that only time and love could heal. She didn't fully understand the complexities of the world or how she could help, but she knew one thing for sure: Thor needed her. She spoke often of Thor at dinner, recounting stories of their encounters at the market. Her parents listened carefully, each word weighing heavily in their hearts. David had always been the practical one, quick to weigh the pros and cons of every situation, while Sarah, with her background in psychology, could understand the emotional depth of the dog's suffering. But Emily? She saw only the good in Thor. To her, he wasn't a dangerous dog or a criminal waiting for punishment. He was simply a guardian who had lost his way. The turning point came one evening as Emily's parents sat in the living room, a conversation quietly unfolding between them. "We need to do something," Sarah said, her voice quiet but filled with resolve. "Thor is more than just a dog. He was a hero, and I think Emily sees something in him that most people can't." David paused, his fingers tracing the rim of his coffee cup. "But Sarah, the whole town is afraid of him. He's become a symbol of fear, not trust. What can we do?" Emily, overhearing their conversation, wandered into the room, her small hand clutching a drawing she had made earlier that day. It was a picture of Thor, his strong frame, his protective stance, but this time, she had drawn him with a golden halo above his head. Her little fingers had carefully shaded in the lines, her love for the dog evident in every stroke. "He's not scary," Emily said softly, holding up the picture for them to see. "He's a hero. He saved lives, just like in the flood." She paused, her eyes wide with an innocence that carried the weight of truth. "He just needs someone to show him that he's still good." David's heart sank. He had always prided himself on being logical, on seeing things for what they were. But in that moment, something shifted. His daughter's conviction, her unwavering belief in Thor's goodness, pulled at his heartstrings. He couldn't ignore it anymore. The next Saturday, they returned to the market. The atmosphere was slightly different this time. People were still wary, eyes lingering on Thor as they passed by. But Emily had a new sense of purpose. She wasn't just there to visit. She was there to do something. As they approached Thor, her heart pounded in her chest, but she stepped forward without hesitation, just as she had the week before. Thor looked up as she approached, his amber eyes meeting hers. His posture was still one of resignation, but there was something in his gaze, a flicker of recognition, a hint of hope that hadn't been there before. "Dull," Emily said, kneeling down in front of him. Her voice was steady, filled with the love and compassion that had defined her from the start. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out the apple she had saved, and gently offered it to him. "Are you hungry?" The moment was profound. The crowd, who had watched with suspicion the week before, now found themselves drawn to this simple exchange. The dog, once seen as dangerous, now looked at Emily not with fear, but with understanding. He took the apple with the same gentleness he had shown her before, and in that small act, something began to change. "You see," Emily said, her voice breaking the silence, "he's not dangerous. He's just sad. He just needs to know someone cares." David and Sarah stood behind her, watching as the community around them began to soften. The vendor, Mr. Chin, who had secretly been helping Thor for weeks, stepped forward and nodded in agreement. "She's right," he said quietly, his voice carrying an air of quiet wisdom. "This dog has been through a lot. He's not dangerous, just misunderstood." Emily's confidence was growing, and so was the support of the people around her. They didn't fully understand Thor's past, nor the trauma that had led to his downfall, but they could see the bond between him and Emily, pure, unbroken, and filled with an innate understanding. As they stood there, Emily whispered to Thor, "Don't worry, I'm going to help you. I'll make sure everyone knows who you really are." The simple truth in her words struck the crowd with such force that the air seemed to still. This wasn't just a little girl speaking. It was a soul filled with compassion, standing up for what was right, seeing the truth when others could only see fear. That afternoon, the Parkers made a decision that would change not just their family, but the fate of a dog who had been cast aside by a community that had once celebrated him. Emily, with her heart wide open, was determined to fight for Thor. And in that fight, the entire community would learn the most important lesson of all. Redemption is possible, and love is the key. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Thor's once tragic story was now taking on a new narrative, one where redemption was no longer just a hope, but a living, breathing reality. Emily's parents had agreed to take the next step in helping Thor. With her gentle persuasion, Emily had softened their hearts, but now they were committed to a path that would change everything. It wasn't just about giving a dog a home. It was about offering him a second chance at life and proving to the world that even those who have fallen the hardest can rise again. The Parkers had never imagined that a simple act of compassion would lead to so much. The community, once divided over Thor's fate, began to rally behind Emily and her quest to help the dog who had once been a hero. As word spread about Emily's dedication, more and more people started to speak out. Local businesses, vendors, and even school children who had seen Thor's gentleness during past visits began to offer support. They all saw the same thing Emily did, Thor was a victim of misunderstanding and fear, not aggression. Despite the growing support, Emily knew the road ahead would not be easy. Thor had endured so much: physical trauma, neglect, and the emotional scars of being judged unfairly. But Emily was unyielding. She had seen in Thor what no one else had: a heart of gold, a quiet strength, and an unwavering desire to protect. One chilly Saturday morning, as Emily sat with Thor outside the market, she noticed a familiar face approaching. It was Mr. Chin, the vendor who had quietly fed and watered Thor for weeks. His fruit stand was only a few stalls away, and he had watched with a mixture of sorrow and concern as the dog's spirit had slowly eroded over time. "Miss Emily," Mr. Chin called out, his voice soft yet full of determination. "I've been thinking a lot about Thor. I never once saw him act aggressively, even when people were cruel. He just needs someone who believes in him." Emily nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had spent so many afternoons sitting with Thor, talking to him, and reassuring him that things would get better. But Mr. Chin's words struck a deeper chord. "He's more than just a dog," she said, looking up at the elderly man. "He's a friend, and he's been through a lot. But I believe he can heal. I believe he can be a hero again." Emily's words had a ripple effect. More people began to take notice. It wasn't just Emily's fight anymore. It was the community's. They had all seen what she saw. They had all heard the stories of Thor's past and recognized the injustice that had been done to him. It wasn't just about saving Thor. It was about changing the way the world saw redemption, healing, and second chances. But as the support grew, so did the opposition. A cloud of uncertainty still hung over the dog's future, and the legal battle to reclaim him from his previous owner, James Miller, was far from over. Miller's neglect had been documented, but there were still legal hurdles to overcome. And with the stigma attached to Thor's past, there were still people who believed the dog was too dangerous to be trusted. David and Sarah knew the fight would be long and difficult, but they also knew they couldn't back down. Emily had already proven that love, compassion, and unwavering belief in another being could move mountains. They would support their daughter in every way they could. One evening, as Emily sat in her room drawing, she paused to look at the pictures she had created over the past few weeks. They were filled with scenes of Thor, his noble face, his fierce loyalty, and his quiet strength. Emily had started a new project for school, a report about rescue dogs and the power of second chances. But it was more than just a project to her. It was a way to help people understand the importance of giving others a chance to heal, to grow, and to find their purpose once again. Her drawings were accompanied by notes that detailed Thor's past, his heroic acts, and the love he had shown to the people who needed him most. The photos of him carrying a baby to safety, the video of him rescuing children from a collapsed building, these were all part of the story. And Emily was determined to make sure everyone knew it. "Daddy," Emily said one night as she walked into the living room where David was sitting at his desk, papers spread out in front of him. "I want to make a sign for the market. It'll say, 'Thor is a hero, not a villain.' I want people to know the truth." David looked up from his work, his heart swelling with pride. Emily's conviction, her determination to change the narrative, was something he hadn't expected. But now, seeing how much she believed in Thor, he understood that this fight wasn't just about proving the dog's worth. It was about proving the value of empathy, understanding, and love. "That's a great idea, sweetheart," David said, smiling warmly. "We'll get it printed tomorrow. You're doing more than just helping Thor. You're teaching everyone what it means to stand up for what's right." As the weekend approached, Emily and her parents prepared for another visit to the market. Emily clutched the sign she had made, carefully drawn in bold letters, ready to share Thor's true story with everyone who would listen. When they arrived at the market, Emily stood beside Thor, her little hand resting gently on his back. The sign she held high said it all: "Thor is a hero, not a villain." As shoppers passed by, many stopped to read, to look at the dog who had once been a symbol of fear but was now being redefined by the power of one small girl's belief in him. And that's when it happened. The crowd began to shift. People who had once crossed the street to avoid Thor now came closer. They saw the sign, and they saw the dog in a new light. It wasn't just about the stories of his past. It was about the bond between Emily and Thor, the way the dog had transformed from a broken soul into something much more. As Emily smiled up at her parents, her heart swelled with pride. The journey wasn't over, and the road ahead would be difficult. But with each passing day, she was helping to rebuild the reputation of a dog who had saved lives, a dog who had been misunderstood, and a dog who was now on the path to healing. And for Emily, that was all that mattered. But despite their growing support, the battle was far from won. James Miller, Thor's former owner, had filed a claim to regain custody of the dog, and the legal proceedings were becoming increasingly complicated. David and Sarah had been preparing for the hearing, but the pressure was mounting. Every day, they worked tirelessly to gather evidence, seek out witnesses, and prepare for what was sure to be a difficult battle. But Emily's resolve had never wavered. She continued to visit Thor every Saturday, her heart steadfast in her belief that he was more than just a dog. He was a family member, a hero who had given everything for the community. She knew that no matter how hard the fight, they would win in the end. It was during one of her visits to Thor that something extraordinary happened. As Emily approached the market that Saturday, she noticed a familiar face waiting for her. It was Mrs. Rodriguez, the owner of the flower stall, who had been one of the first people to notice the mistreatment of Thor. Mrs. Rodriguez had been an advocate for the dog from the beginning, quietly documenting his neglect and speaking out when she saw the opportunity. Now, she had something to share with Emily, something that could change everything. "Emily, I've been talking to the others, and we've all decided that we need to do more," Mrs. Rodriguez said, her voice soft but filled with determination. "The town is starting to see Thor in a new light, and we want to make sure his story is told the right way. We've collected pictures, videos, and testimonies from the vendors. We've even talked to some of the children who remember him from school events. We're all behind you and Thor, and we're ready to help however we can." Emily's eyes widened with surprise and gratitude. She had always known that Thor had touched the hearts of those around him. But to hear that the community was ready to stand by him in such a tangible way filled her with hope. "Thank you," Emily said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "I'm going to keep fighting for Thor, but I know I can't do it alone. This means everything to me." Mrs. Rodriguez smiled and patted Emily gently on the shoulder. "You're not alone, child. We're all in this together." And so, the legal battle began to shift. The Parkers, with the support of the entire community, filed their case with renewed vigor. Emily's story of Thor, the hero who had been misunderstood, spread like wildfire. News outlets picked up the story, and soon, the entire town was behind them. The rally in support of Thor grew larger, and the voices of the community began to speak louder than ever before. The night before the hearing, Emily sat by her bed, clutching the stuffed dog she had held since she was a little girl. Thor's face had become a constant presence in her life, even in her dreams. In her dreams, she saw Thor standing proudly, wearing a police badge, leading children to safety, and receiving the recognition he had long deserved. "Daddy," Emily said quietly, her voice soft but filled with certainty. "I know we're going to win. Thor belongs with us. He's part of our family now. He's not just a dog. He's a hero." David looked up from the papers he had been reviewing, his expression one of quiet pride. He knew that his daughter was right. He had seen the way Thor had transformed from a broken soul into something more, something that was once again worthy of love, respect, and honor. "Tomorrow is a big day, sweetheart," David said, his voice filled with warmth. "But no matter what happens, we've already won. Thor has already shown us what true courage looks like. And you, Emily, have shown us what it means to believe in something bigger than ourselves." The next morning, the family prepared for the hearing. It was a cold and gray day, with the first hints of winter creeping into the air. They arrived at the courthouse early, surrounded by supporters who had gathered to show their solidarity. Emily clutched her drawing of Thor, the one she had made in the courtroom-style game she had played with her stuffed animals. It was a simple drawing, but to her, it represented everything she believed in. It was her way of showing the world that Thor wasn't just a dog. He was a hero who had saved lives, and he deserved a second chance. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. The opposing side, led by Thomas Miller, James Miller's brother, presented their case with cold efficiency. They argued that Thor's past was too complicated, that he was too much of a liability. But as they spoke, Emily felt a sense of clarity. She wasn't fighting for a dog. She was fighting for justice. She was fighting for the truth to be heard. When it was their turn to speak, David stood tall and addressed the court. His voice, usually calm and measured, now carried a note of passion. "This dog saved lives," he said, his eyes steady. "He didn't attack anyone. He didn't harm anyone. He acted in the heat of the moment, just as he was trained to do. What happened that night was tragic, but it wasn't Thor's fault. And I believe he deserves a second chance. He deserves to be with the family that has come to love him." As he spoke, Emily felt a quiet sense of peace wash over her. This was more than just a legal battle. It was about Thor's legacy. It was about showing the world that no one, no matter how broken or misunderstood, should ever be discarded. The moment that followed was nothing short of transformative. Emily stood up, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't scared. She was ready to do what needed to be done. She walked to the front of the courtroom, her drawing of Thor held high in her hands. "Thor is a hero," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "And he deserves to be part of our family." The room fell silent. The judge, who had been listening intently, looked down at Emily and then at the drawing in her hands. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of Emily's breathing. And then something shifted. The room, filled with so many doubts, began to feel lighter. The truth had been spoken. The courthouse was quiet as the judge deliberated, the weight of the decision pressing down on everyone in the room. Emily sat with her parents, her heart racing as she clutched the drawing of Thor she had brought with her. Her small fingers trembled as she held it close, but her mind was clear. She knew, without a doubt, that Thor belonged with them. He wasn't just a dog, he was family. Outside, the wind had picked up, swirling autumn leaves around the courthouse steps. The tension in the air was palpable as supporters from the town gathered, waiting for the verdict. It wasn't just about Thor anymore. It was about the community coming together, rallying for what was right. They had all witnessed his transformation, his healing, and they had all seen Emily's unwavering belief in him. Thor wasn't just the dog who had been misunderstood. He was the dog who had taught them all the power of second chances. Finally, the doors to the courtroom opened, and the judge entered. The room fell silent as everyone stood to attention. The judge took his seat, his eyes scanning the room before he turned to Emily. "Miss Parker," the judge said, his voice soft but firm. "This has been a difficult case, with many perspectives to consider. But after hearing the testimonies, seeing the evidence, and witnessing the bond between you and Thor, I believe it is clear that this dog deserves a chance to live in a home where he is loved and cared for." The room held its breath as the judge paused, then continued. "I am ruling in favor of the Parkers. Thor will remain with his new family, and I hope that his story will serve as a reminder to all of us that we must look beyond the surface, beyond the labels that others put on us, and recognize the true potential within." A wave of relief swept over Emily and her parents. The battle was over. Thor had won his second chance, and the world had finally recognized him for the hero he truly was. Tears filled Emily's eyes as she turned to look at Thor, who had been patiently sitting beside her, his head lowered, but his eyes bright with hope. She knew that their fight was far from over, but this was the moment they had all been waiting for. When they left the courthouse, the crowd outside erupted into applause. Vendors from the market, neighbors, even children who had once feared Thor, now cheered for him. Emily smiled up at her parents, her heart swelling with pride. She had done it. They had all done it together. That night, as the Parkers gathered around their dinner table, Thor lay at their feet, his head resting on Emily's lap. The family had come together, not just to rescue a dog, but to rescue a piece of themselves. They had learned the true meaning of love, not the kind of love that demands perfection, but the kind of love that sees beyond the scars and recognizes the potential for healing and growth. Emily turned to Thor, her small hand gently resting on his fur. "See, Thor," she whispered softly. "Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they have fur and 4 legs, and sometimes they just need someone to believe in them again." As the firelight flickered in the corner of the room, casting a warm glow over the family, Emily's words hung in the air like a promise. No matter what happened next, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be, they had found something truly precious, a bond forged not in perfection, but in love. And that was something that no one could ever take away. Thor's tail thumped softly against the floor, a small but powerful reminder that he had found his place. But by the love and acceptance he had found in the hearts of those who truly understood him. The journey had been long, but the healing had begun. And for Emily, that was the most important lesson of all. That love, in its purest form, could heal even the deepest wounds. And it was through that love that they had all been transformed. The journey of Thor and Emily is a powerful reminder of the importance of second chances. In life, many of us have been misunderstood or hurt, but through love, compassion, and belief in one another, we can find healing. Emily's unwavering faith in Thor teaches us that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is to show love and empathy, even when others may have given up. The story is a call to see beyond the surface, to offer second chances, and to believe in the possibility of redemption and transformation. And let us know how you've seen love and compassion make a difference in your life. And don't forget to subscribe to the Heart Force channel for more heartwarming stories like this one.